Greetings, everyone. Hi, it's Coach Laurie here. Welcome to Let's Talk Tuesday. Today, I have a very dynamic man that I met at a function a few weeks ago at a mom circle, and he came in and spoke to us. And I'm here today with Mr. Scott Vinci. He is a domestic violence educator. Wonderful stuff. Great information. I wanted to thank you very much for Mr. Vinci for coming and coming to talk to my crew at Let's Talk Tuesday. I appreciate that very much in your time.
Laurie, it's my pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you very much. And can you please tell my audience and me a little bit about yourself, please?
Well, I'm a domestic violence educator and recovery specialist. Since 2004, I've been involved with providing domestic violence batterer intervention education programs for perpetrators of domestic violence. That pertains to family violence on one side of the spectrum and intimate partner violence on the other end. And since 2010, I've also been providing recovery education for victims of domestic abuse.
Thank you very much. I believe I know this answer already, but what are you most passionate about?
I think I'm most passionate about helping people reflect on what has happened in their life and what specific steps they need to take to preserve and rebuild their dignity and their self-esteem after having been abused for a period of time in a relationship. And in those relationships that are so important in our lives, usually with a family member or with an intimate partner. And those relationships, when you're being abused, leave very deep wounds that need to be healed. And I've learned and perfected specific processes that help people regain their dignity and rebuild their self-esteem over a relatively short period of time. I've had clients that have been in therapy for years. One client indicated that she had been in therapy since her 20s, and she was now in her early 50s. Mm. And she indicated to me that in just a short time we worked together, she made more progress more rapidly than she had made in all those years of therapy.
Mm. That's very prominent. Thank you. I'm glad that you're passionate. I'm glad you're helping out that piece of our society that no one really wants to talk about, but is really needs to be at the front and center of stuff, because everything that's going on in the world. How do you overcome your fears?
I'm a very strategic thinker. So I first identify what it is specifically that I'm afraid of or that I fear about a specific event, activity, relationship. And then I figure out what I need to do, whether it's something I need to prepare or something I need to learn to manage the risks associated with whatever that is that I'll be undertaking. In fact, I wrote a paper recently specifically about that, how I've learned over time that fear is an indicator of a risk that we are not in our present state prepared for. And it's a signal that if we wish to proceed, we need to take the steps necessary to learn what the risks are and what we need to do to manage those risks. And I've come to that conclusion from watching people who accomplish things that I normally would be afraid of. But they have no fear about undertaking those tasks or activities. For example, jumping out of an airplane, canoeing on the white waters of the Grand Rapid rivers. Mm-hmm. Those things scare the life out of me, just the thought of doing it. But yet there's people that do those activities and enjoy them every day. Or walking into a business meeting and giving a presentation and communicating your message effectively to have a positive outcome. So I studied what is it that those people do or learn or prepare in order to overcome the kind of fear that I have and be able to do that successfully. And in most cases, it's that they've prepared, they've learned, and they've identified the risks and how to manage the risks involved. Now, certainly, there are tragedies that happen from time to time when undertaking any risky activity. But when you properly prepare, learn what you need to learn to manage the risks involved, and take those necessary steps, the likelihood of a tragic outcome is significantly diminished. And many people enjoy those activities on a regular basis.
Okay. Is that also some type of the process of the thinking that you do when you're achieving your goals, when you like goal setting and goal planning? Do you use that same kind of mind structure, that same thinking when you're doing your goals?
Absolutely. I learned a long time ago, probably in the 1980s, that positive thinking by itself doesn't accomplish the goal. That there has to be specific actions in addition to that strategy that you take to identify the steps necessary that increase the chances of a positive outcome and reduce the chances of a failure.
Okay, I agree with that because you have to have the thought and the steps. Like you got to have the action steps. You have the idea, but you got to take action in order for those to come to fruition. Okay, I get that. I get that.
One of my mentors that I trained with, Mr. Tony Robbins, who was, very popular in today's society, said back in the early 1980s, when he wrote the book Personal Power, he wrote in there, success leaves clues. And we can discern what people have done that have helped them be successful if we study them and we pay attention to the steps that they've taken. So I follow that strategy.
Thought of that strategy. Okay. What would you tell your younger self?
I would tell my younger self to be more kind to yourself.
Be more kind to yourself.
Very harsh to myself. I was very judgmental towards myself. I'm a short man. I'm not a man of tall stature. Mm-hmm. Many of the things I wanted to accomplish in my life would have required me being a taller person. Okay. I wanted to play sports, at least collegiately, if not professionally. Mm-hmm. And I was successful in high school, but I wasn't able to advance to the college level. There was things that I was afraid of because I didn't prepare properly and I made mistakes and I failed at certain things. And so I shied away from those interests that I had, that if I had pursued them and kept to it over time, would have been much more successful with them.
Okay.
Music was one, for example. I had a very hard time learning to play the guitar. Mm-hmm. It takes a while to get your fingers toughened up so that they don't hurt every time you play chords or play notes. And I didn't persevere in taking those lessons and learning the techniques of playing the guitar properly. I was caught up in the fact that I wasn't well prepared and it was painful and it was uncomfortable. And I didn't learn at the time that you can get various sizes of the neck of the guitar to accommodate the size of your hand. The first guitar that I had was bought at a Sears and Roebuck, which was a generic style folk guitar with a very wide neck, and I have a very small hand. So I wasn't able to wrap my hand around the neck of the guitar very easily to play those chords. I didn't know that you could buy a customized guitar with a narrower neck that would accommodate the length of my fingers to be able to play more easily. So I gave up music at a very early age. And I really enjoy music, and I wish I was able to play some instruments, particularly string instruments. I really like string instruments.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to say this. It's never too late to learn. You can always learn, always pick up something. It's never too late to go towards your dreams. So try it.
Well, I teach myself to play the drums. I found that the drums were a great instrument to relieve frustration.
Yes, it is.
And aside from learning the rudiments of drumming, it didn't cause any pain in any parts of my body. So I enjoyed playing the drums.
You enjoyed playing the drums? Okay, that's good. I agree with that. What are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of my professional ethics. I was an ambulance attendant in my late teens and early 20s here in Manchester, Connecticut, a couple towns over. And I really enjoyed that work. I enjoyed being in helping services. And I advanced from being an EMT on an ambulance team to becoming a police officer over in Hartford, Connecticut, where I was there for 20 years. And my philosophy in that job was all about being of service and helping people that were in the worst situations make the best possible outcome for their situation. And I always did it to the best of my ability, aligned with my personal values. And so I would say my professional ethics, my personal ethics that transferred into my professional career. That's probably the most important thing for me.
Thank you. Thank you. What is your favorite quote and why?
One that I use quite frequently with clients and that really helps me stay focused on my work and my curiosity, which is so important to do the work that I do, to not fall into judgment, but to remain curious. And that quote is, all behavior is communication. To broaden our awareness of our need to be curious, because if we just focus on the words that people speak, we miss so much of the core elements of the message that's being communicated. Mm-hmm. And just like when we had our brief conversation just a few days ago, mm-hmm. we talked about, you mentioned how you were aware of certain facial expressions or tics, like curling up the corner of your lips or the corner of your eye, mm-hmm. while people are speaking. All those are indicators. And if we can learn to understand the nonverbal components of someone's message, it gives so much more weight and power to the words that they're offering to us.
Right, right. Especially with coaching clients, and I guess with you too, you can see them. Sometimes their face tells a real story, regardless what their words are saying. You know, they can say, yes, I'm fine. But you look at their face and their face is drawn, they're looking down, they're kind of shrugged up, and you know they're not fine. So you know to ask more questions or try to dive deeper. And that's hard, like when you didn't have inpatient consults and people trying to coach on the phone, there's a little struggle because you can only go by the tone of the voice, but you didn't get to really see their face to really tell the story. So I agree with that. I concur with that. I know I know the work that you do is very prominent and very engaging. Do you do a lot of things in the community? Do you have specific community things or anything you do in the community that you live in?
In 2004, I enrolled with the Salvation Army mm-hmm. as a disaster relief coordinator. Okay. And I was shipped down to Biloxi, Mississippi after Hurricane Katrina. Spent a month down there coordinating the distribution of services that were needed in various areas. Some people have power, so they needed generators. Other people didn't have water or needed ice to preserve food. Other people could not drive their cars out of the area because of debris that was blocking the roads. So they needed the roads to be cleared, or they needed supplies that were lifted into their area. So I would go out as a liaison and scout the different communities to identify what services were needed, and then report that back to the command center each morning. And then the other agencies, the Salvation Army, Goodwill, the South Methodist or Southern Methodist charitable organization that was there, Samaritan's Purse was there. All these nonprofit organizations were there. providing services. And so at these meetings every morning, we would coordinate who had what supplies and where they needed to be distributed. So I did that in 2004. And then I've maintained my certifications with Salvation Armies over the years and expanded it to the Red Cross. So I'm also certified to manage a shelter, a disaster shelter for the Red Cross if there's a disaster that they need staffing for. And so from time to time, I would participate in different events with the Red Cross's food truck, which they provide at race events, public races, public funeral services. For example, there was a police officer killed in Manchester several years ago, and they had a massive funeral in town, and we provided the Red Cross food truck for the marchers in the parade along the parade route so they could get refreshments while they were going by, because it was quite a long walk in the parade route, in the funeral procession. So things like that I do. I've had a goal in my retirement to be involved with Habitat for Humanity. And I love to travel, especially around the United States. And they have these build outs where they build homes for people. Mm-hmm. They recruit volunteers to come in who have construction skills for a week or a weekend to do some aspect of the construction. And because I've done home renovations for myself over the years, that's something that I look forward to doing as I advance more into retirement as the years come on.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for the information. I appreciate your dedication to the domestic violence genre. The women need it, and some men need it. And both men and women do need that. It's more promoted that it's women, but I know our conversation we had previously that there are a lot of men that's in this situation as well. Can you please tell my audience if there's any current projects you're working on or things that we can look out for that's coming out in the future?
Well, I have a goal to, now that the COVID is lifted and we can socialize again. I have a goal of having a live weekend conference where people can come and we can do the work that I do together, and they can network and they can identify accountability partners and build friendships that they can take, back home with them to help support them in their recovery from abuse. And that's one of my goals. A lot of the education that I received and the greatest help that I received in my own recovery and rebuilding my own identity was in live weekend events that I would attend with Tony Robbins, I mentioned earlier, John Bradshaw, who back in the 1980s was on public television with programs about family systems and codependency within the family. Mm-hmm. And that really was the impetus for me wanting to learn more, was trying to understand what was going on in our family system with the influence of birth order and power and control and egos and everything that was going on. It was creating this confusion in my own mind about what was right and what wasn't right. So John Bradshaw was where it started for me. And then Raquel Lerner, who also taught about codependency. And then I started going to these 12-step programs for codependence at the Asylum Church in Hartford here for a number of years. That was fantastic, being able to connect with other people in the same situation, because you didn't feel alone and people understood what you were dealing with. Right. It wasn't that you were trying to explain it to someone who had no clue what you were going through. So it was great. So I think that connectivity, that association is really powerful. And I'd like to create something like that and start it in the United States and then bring it to some of the other countries that I have clients in: Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, the UK. I think it would be exciting to have that on an annual basis where people can come together and associate.
Yes, that sounds like a great idea. Do you have a goal for this year to start one? By end of this year, 2023?
I have an ambition for it. I wouldn't say it's a goal yet because there's things in the planning that I'm still working on. One of the goals that I do have as must-haves for this year is to create some videos that I can use where I kind of like reels, which they have on Facebook now, which kind of mimic some of the Instagram or TikTok short snippets.
Mm-hmm.
To create some of those where I speak about maybe a specific point in the recovery process after leaving an abusive relationship, or how to recognize the red flags if you're not aware that what's happening in your relationship is really a form of domestic abuse. It's not just someone having a bad mood or someone having a bad day, or maybe they'll change if I act a certain way. The fact that you're experiencing that and it's calling your attention to it is telling you, pay attention here. Something's not right. It's not aligned with who you are and the quality of life that you want to have for yourself in your relationship.
Thank you. I do know that you have two books. Can you please give the name of your two books?
So I was writing this book here called If I Had Known. The early warning signs women said they wish they had known before their worst intimate relationship. And this is a compilation of all the things that I learned from the victims that I worked with over the years. And what they described that they either noticed and didn't give much credit to, or didn't notice and ignored. And they said in the recovery program, I wish I had known that this was abusive, or I wish I had known that this behavior would lead to some form of domestic violence. So over the course of Memorial Day weekend, 2020, I wrote this book, Bruised Not Broken. And in October 2020, it was released on Amazon and went to #1 in the domestic abuse category. And it's called Bruised Not Broken, Break the Trauma Bond of Abuse, 4 Critical Steps to Begin Healing and Reclaim Your Dignity and Self-Esteem. I adapted Bruised Not Broken, which was designed for women, and I have the copy of Bruised Not Broken for men. It's also available on Amazon. It's basically the same. 4 critical steps, only 4. It's that simple to begin healing and reclaim your dignity and self-esteem after an abusive relationship. And this is a strategy that I encourage people to follow for 60 to 90 days. And it has a wonderful impact because it's not just wishful thinking. It's not just wishing to put the past behind you. It actually describes how to take specific actions that rewire the neural pathways in your brain that focus on releasing the powerful endorphins of dignity and self-esteem that are suppressed when you're suffering from abuse.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Thank you. Yes, there is a circle of violence with all things, and I believe in your book too. It even talks about the words that they use, the mannerisms that they have to warn women that this is a form of abuse, and this could be a potential abusive situation.
It can be an indicator. And the purpose of the book is to make people aware of the early warning signs, those signals that you may see or hear that occur before the overt acts of abuse or violence actually show up in the relationship. It's the precursor to what people commonly refer to as the red flag. Well, most people can recognize the red flag, but once the red flag is there, now you're being abused. And so these early warning signs, while there's some red flags that are identified in there, it also identifies the precursors, the language patterns, the words that they use, the physiology, the way they react to you, all those indicators that let you know that you are not the highest priority for this individual. And that at some point, elements of domestic abuse, domestic violence potentially, and that includes the many forms of domestic violence: physical, emotional, psychological, sexual, financial, and now cyber violence as well, right? That aren't necessarily going to cause bruises on your body, but will cause wounds in your heart.
Thank you, Scott, so much. This information is it's different, and it's also more different because it's coming from a male. And most times, most domestic violence people, educators, are female. So this is the reason I wanted to interview you, because it is a different take, because it's coming from a male, and a male is giving this information. So which is kind of like we get to peek into the mind of because you are a male. So it's kind of like it's giving us an extra kind of deeper peek, because since you're a man and you can sense that, kind of gives a little more light to things like that. I appreciate that very much. Thank you very much for everything that you're doing for the domestic violence women situation, and trying to help women be aware of signs that they can get of the abuse earlier. Thank you very much for coming on to Let's Talk Tuesday, and I hope that we can connect and collaborate something in the future.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm really grateful for it.
Thank you. When I heard this story, when you presented, and I was like, I have to let someone else know this, because it was hitting my heart and it touched me. I'm like, wow, it's just so dynamic, because it's coming from a male, and most men don't talk about it. When you say that, you slap around and put her in line, but it's a whole different mentality than that. When you was giving your presentation, I was like, wow, this needs to be shared with other people, because I never heard of that. I've never, I've been to some domestic things, which are always focusing on, the male, or not this end, like the recovery piece of how to get through it. Like they go through the medical, the other piece, but this is on the back end of it, and I really appreciate it. So thank you again for coming and sharing with my group. Thank you.
Thank you very much.